So it's 11:02, and none of our participants have gotten where they are by being anything but punctual. So I'm going to respect them by following that lead, and I'll let people in along the way. For everyone's awareness, this is being recorded because there's a big group of people who have expressed that they love the recording, and so know that and calibrate your comments to the degree that you're comfortable with there. I'm going to do my best to keep this to an hour so everyone can get back to their lives. Um, this is an experiment, and I'm so grateful that you're all here to participate in this experiment with me. Um, it's not, while it seems like a big group of people, and it is not a random group of people. You are all dear friends, close to my heart. You've enhanced and changed my journey. You've taught me so much in order to allow me to do work like this. And and it's an honor both to be in a digital room with our four participants, but it's a deep, deep honor and privilege to have you all here. So the way that we're going to structure this is I'm going to buzz through some definitions, share a little bit of framing and why I'm holding this call, um, offer you a teeny little exercise, and then we're going to get into introductions and Q&A with our panelists. So the framing here is that I'm experiencing a real dichotomy. I try not to read the news on a daily basis. I instead read something called fixthenews.com, which I invite everybody to follow along with. And I also catch up with frontline operators like everyone who's on as participants today, where I'm seeing incredible progress. I still hear the news, I still hear the negative information, and I attune to it. But I try to over optimize or over index my time towards the progress. And I think it's worth it. The thread here that brought us all together is that Dan, Ian, Marcus, and Amber are all working both at an individual level, changing human lives one by one, but also at a systems change level. They're also focused, whether they realized it or not, and it was really interesting speaking with Marcus about this. Um, they're also focused on an element of freedom, whether that is a driving force on a daily basis or not. They're focused on these various levels of freedom. And I found that as I thought through these three organizations or initiatives or energy that the four people collectively are putting in, when I realized this through line of everybody working towards a greater level of autonomy for a greater number of people and using leverage in the system, I couldn't look away from the idea of hosting this call. And so the goal with that background is for us to come away having learned about the success from these focused individuals of what a team and a vision can generate and the catalytic system that optimizes the leverage within. That's what I want us to come away from. Hopefully, you also come away with some optimism because surely a lot of people are working on your energy to click via pessimism. Bad news sells a lot more clicks than good news. And I think we can overcome that. The last kind of guiding element here is from the center left and center right, where I try to listen to most of my friends as opposed to being yanked far left and far right. Um, I experienced over the last 2 years a lot of people who were overly pessimistic about where the United States was or where it's going. And I then ran an exercise as a father, a Jewish father, with a child, with a family member with pre-existing health conditions, I ran an exercise of where else in the world would we want to be? Would we want to grow a family? And where would we want to grow our lives and businesses? And I end up landing here. So with all of that, that's the frame. I wanted to share a quote to not just be the guy that says things are going to be okay, but share a little data. This is from the founder of Fix the News. He said, every year, the Gallup surveys around 1,000 people in 142 countries asking about their lives and expectations. In the most recent edition, 33% of respondents said they were thriving, the highest proportion on record. The share who said they were suffering dropped to 7%, matching the lowest level since tracking began in 2007. A decade ago, it was 12%. You might expect these numbers to feature prominently in coverage about the state of the world. They don't. A record 4 in 5 people are satisfied with their personal freedoms, and 3 in 4 say their country is in a good place for their children to learn and grow. Optimism has rebounded to its highest point since the financial crisis. More people in more countries report living better lives than any point since measurements began. Now, I'll share this quote and the tiny exercise that I told you I might ask you to do. And that is from David Foster Wallace. There are these 2 fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way. He nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" The 2 fish swim along for a bit, and eventually one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" I think we experience freedom this way. And I think that if we're a bit more aware of the privilege of freedom, like the privilege of clean water, if we drink water in the morning and realize the system that it took to get that clean water to us that we just drink, I think that we might recognize it or notice it a bit more. So the tiny exercise that I want on the corner of your minds is for you to write digitally or on a piece of paper. I want you to write the 4 words right now, "I'm free to." You can interpret that in 2 different ways. You can interpret that as I'm welcome to spend time with my kids, learn, breathe clean air. Or you can define I'm free to as I'm free in order to. If we have a layer, a system of freedom under us, what are we free in order to do? Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to define from 2 different people, both of whom experienced slavery in their lives, how they look at freedom. Dear friends who I called ahead of this one, Luong Ung, whose family was killed during the Khmer Rouge genocide, and she was able to survive. She says the ability to listen to our own inner vibrations of what we're called to do on behalf of others is freedom. And Emmanuel Jal, who was a child soldier in Sudan, what became South Sudan, he said, finding your purpose gives your life a meaning in every stage of suffering. Finding your purpose and activating it is freedom. He went on to say, we can build a ring of fire of our own to keep us in there. So I also welcome you to free yourselves from yourselves. With that, I'm going to introduce everybody. So hosting this call came to mind when I watched Amber and Marcus's film In War and Waves. The movie resonated with me because I was on 15 years of psychopharmaceuticals from an early age into my 20s, and it's taken 15 years to get back to myself. And I'm so grateful for the friends and the community and the line leaders and the healers who were on that journey to make it happen. Marcus and Amber's work represents many layers of fighting for freedom, whether they wake up realizing it or not. But many millions of people are going to be able to experience it thanks to their work. So Amber and Marcus, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves.
Brian, thank you so much for including us on such a powerfully important and impactful call. I'm Amber Capone, co-founder and CEO of VETS. It's an acronym for Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. We exist to give those who have served our country an opportunity to finally come home. And we do so by offering subsidy for them to seek psychedelic assisted therapies in countries where they're legal or unregulated. But you may know that it's not just about the therapy itself. It's about the support system that exists before and after someone has an experience like this, as well as rediscovering purpose and plugging back into community. So we provide all of those things through our programmatic offerings. And when a veteran is welcomed into our program, we welcome 300 or so new veterans year over year. We're supporting their family and we're supporting them for life. We've realized in this mission that it's not just the wounds of war or service to our country that they're grappling with. A lot of times it's severe childhood trauma that has fueled them into service in the first place. So we unknowingly found ourselves in wanting to pay this gift forward, which we discovered in 2017. We've sort of unknowingly stumbled into helping really, really remarkable human beings deal with significant childhood adversity, which the film does capture.
Mhm.
So I'll turn it over to Marcus to introduce himself, but it's just an honor to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks, Ryan, for setting this up, and thanks for everyone spending your time this morning. You could be doing a host of other things, so we're honored. We're grateful to be here. As Amber mentioned, Amber and I started Vets in 2018 after I found healing through a specific plant medicine called ibogaine. And for me, growing up in New York, I was an athlete. I was a collegiate athlete. I was a former SEAL Team 6 member. And when I returned home, I was introduced to traditional approaches to care, to mental health care. And as we know, mental health care right now is on this precipice of innovation, and I'm really excited about the future of it. But in 2010, I was prescribed antidepressants and talk therapy. And for now, we are seeing more than half of the population, and Ryan could probably come up with the exact numbers, but those who come forward don't respond to these therapies. And when someone's coming home from 20 years of combat or a year of head trauma through athletics, through explosions, or childhood trauma, sexual trauma, accidents, the brain doesn't understand the difference between a war trauma and a childhood trauma. It just reacts in the way through depression, anxiety, etc. And so, unfortunately, we are prescribed antidepressants as the go-to approach to care. And for me and for so many others who have complex, mental health issues, it does not work. And so, lucky for me, Amber and I had worked together. I was on antidepressants for almost 7 years straight, and I came to a point where I thought, as an individual who always solves unconventional problems, I thought the unconventional way to do this is to not be here, to end my life, so Amber and the children can um, live a more fruitful life. And that's the kind of the way we think through things. And of course, that's not the right way to think. And for me, traveling outside the country to do an experimental investigational drug like Ibogaine was extremely frightening. But for me, it was life-changing, it was life savings, and it put us on this path to just really pay it forward. And here we are today, helping special operations veterans, and that has grown now to much larger portion of the population. The veteran population is small compared to the U.S. population of 340 million people, and we know there's a mental health crisis, and we're trying to solve that. So I could talk for hours, but I'm sure we'll get into it, Ryan. And just
Yeah.
again, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Very excited to talk about the documentary and everything else that we're doing.
Thank you. Ian, as a bit of background here for everybody, I've been focused with some number of hours per week on modern day slavery and sex slavery and modern day human trafficking for over 20 years. And I was always looking for a systems change approach because of the unbelievable, extraordinary expense that it takes to save each person in triage mode, $5,000 to $10,000 generally. Um, the forms of slavery have continued to proliferate even. And that makes this a very challenging field because of mission creep. And when I learned about Ian from a dear friend here and mentor here in Boston, I was thrilled not only by what he was doing, but by what he and they as a team were not doing.
Hmm.
And so I joined the advisory board, and I continue to just be amazed day over day at the progress that you're making. So thank you for being here, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm excited to learn from these other people on the call today. So, I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Network. We're a data-driven counter-human trafficking organization. Our mission is we defeat trafficking networks, and we do that by learning, by understanding how trafficking organizations function as a business. Underneath all of the complex issues that lead someone into trafficking or to make trafficking possible, we sort of believe at the core that traffickers sell people for one reason, because it makes money. And 13 years ago, when we launched, we said, well, could we make it not make money? Could we make it higher risk, lower profit to disincentivize the criminal, but still just financial choice to sell people in slavery? And we've done that. We focused first on one of the largest forms of organized trafficking in the United States, the illicit massage industry. These massage storefronts, they're often confusing in our culture, misunderstood as either willing prostitution or, a kind of a joke, a happy ending. The reality is that today, this morning, there are about 40,000 women, mostly undocumented Chinese or Korean women, who are being exploited against their will in commercial sex in broad daylight, in safe neighborhoods and strip malls near our house. I came to this work through a long journey. I was at the Central Intelligence Agency for 10 years, and prior to that, I worked for the military for about 8 years. I was an Air Force officer. Studied electrical engineering, and I think that engineering kind of background made me kind of a nerd. I like data. I also like to think about systems. My co-founder is a Delta Force officer, was a Delta Force officer, and also one of my closest friends.
Thank you, Ian. To ground people in that particular sliver, which is disappointing that even its magnitude is still a sliver of modern day trafficking slavery. Um, Ian and I are working on Massachusetts together, not as fast as I would like. And I came to understand that there's approximately 6,000 of these storefronts in Massachusetts. I could show you a slide that there are more of these storefronts around the United States than McDonald's franchises, which is just baffling. And on average, there are two to three uh, sex slaves within each group, within each box, and over seven occasions of rape on a daily basis. And so that means what was baffling to me is with Ian and the team's strategy, which they'll get into, they are able to shut down 50% of the boxes in a relatively short order while partnering with governors and attorneys generals. 50% of the boxes in Massachusetts would be 3,000 times 2.5 times 7. We're looking at avoiding 20 per day times 3,000. So we're avoiding over 1 million rapes in Massachusetts by their entering this state. It's a big deal. So I wanted to ground us all there. And now to systems architecture. I've known Dan for well over a decade. We met through the World Economic Forum, and most of my and Dan's peers at WEF and Shapers or Young Global Leaders, YGL, focus on social entrepreneurship, focus on intrapreneurship within massive corporations to try to do more good. And I was always enamored watching Dan take a very different tact into into government and into public service. I don't think that most people are aware of the leverage that folks and organizations like the network or like vets can achieve when really thoughtful people are in strategic places in labor, in the ear of the president, formally, and now entering our Congress and Senate. And so I was so honored to have Dan join us here because we don't have time for one-to-one hand combat in any of these subjects. We need systems change in partnership with government. So thank you for being here, Dan. I'd love to hear your background.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for all you do for the community, for our friendship, and just learning from your example over the years has been inspiring to me. And just the attendance on this call and the engagement is just a testament to you and how much we all admire your leadership. It's nice to meet everybody, and I appreciate your time. I'm running for a couple of very simple reasons. I think we have a choice right now. We can sit back, we can roll over while we see historic discord in government, where we see record numbers of people staying home because they see both parties and they're disgusted by the way the system is and they've given up. Where many people are worried about the future of our democracy and how we move forward. Or we can fight back for the country that we believe in and that we know and love. My specific reason for running is because I have two German, Irish, Italian, Lebanese, Korean, American kids. And I want them to grow up in a country that's proud of its diversity, that welcomes people no matter your race, no matter your creed, no matter your gender, and that we are proud of that very DNA of the United States that got us to where we are. I come from a family of fighters. One side of my family comes from a little village off the southeast of Beirut, Lebanon. Very typical story that so many of you have of a family wanting a better life and taking a risk and betting everything on the United States. The other side of my family comes from a little fishing village off the coast of South Korea. My grandfather was ambassador to the United States from Korea under a democracy that was overthrown by a dictator. And he had a very simple choice. Will he stay in the dictatorship and represent dictatorship, or will he leave everything to start his life over in America? He chose the latter. And as a result of that, a Korean Lebanese guy has a chance to potentially become a congressman from his hometown district, the first AAPI in Arab in the history of Massachusetts if we're successful. And I'm running because, and Ryan alluded to this, and we worked closely together when I was chief of staff to Mayor Walsh in Boston. I refuse to accept that this is the best that DC can do because I've seen government work for people. People say that government is too bureaucratic and that it never gets anything done, but tell that to the senior with type 1 diabetes who was paying $350 a month for insulin. But when I was in the White House with President Biden, we worked on a policy that helped reduce that to just $35 a month. Or when we were in the city of Boston and working for the city, we had a very simple approach, which was that business and jobs and people should all be at the table. The idea that we should vilify business as part of administrating a city was counter to the goal of providing the tax revenue that would allow for good, thoughtful city services, good, thoughtful education, taking care of people's educational opportunities, as well as universal pre-K, as well as good healthcare, as well as good infrastructure. All of that comes from a very thoughtful ecosystem of business and people. And the vilification of that ecosystem, in my mind, needs to stop. It's also about making sure to have thoughtful technological innovation that makes people's lives easier in government. So when I was chief of staff, we came up with the 311 app in Boston. In Boston, you can use that app, and if you see a pothole, not only can you take a picture of that pothole and you will get a picture of the filled pothole, but you will also get a picture of the team that filled the pothole. Because in our opinion, it's about people helping people at the core of government. And lastly, when I was on the Andover Select Board, it was about how you make the boring stuff critical, how you set the town on a healthy financial path for generations to come, which is what we did with a AAA bond rating, so that our grandkids and our great-grandkids won't be saddled by the debt of the mistakes of so many elected officials we see today, whether it be the federal level or the most local. And with regard to the public discourse, we can certainly disagree with the different policies and the approaches to politics. But our debates should be on the fairway, so to speak. Our debates should be on the playing field, not personal attacks on families, on kids, but on what we honestly think is the right approach for government. What are the facts and the agendas that we think would make sense? I disagree with the president's approach on the VA because I don't think that laying off 80,000 people at the VA is the right approach if we want to take care of our veterans. And I want to have that debate. And the debate should be about those issues. And I respect the fact that there may be Republicans who have different approaches on how to manage taxes, debt, et cetera. But we should have that conversation thoughtfully, fairly, not personally, and that we need to fight for the values that we believe in. And
Thanks.
so at the end of the day, I believe in this. I believe in the American dream. That's why I'm running, and I'm honored to be a part of this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I want to stay with you for a second. Where do you think where do you think the American system is more resilient than the discourse and the headlines suggest?
Despite all of the reasons that the algorithms have set for us to hate each other,
Yeah,
we still love and care for our neighbors, our geographically close proximity neighbors. When I talk to people on my street, I don't know whether they are a Trump supporter or a Harris supporter or what have you. I just care about them because they're a part of my community. And
yeah,
I see that over and over again still. And that gives me a lot of faith that there's a way out of this, that it's the technology and the algorithms that are turning us against each other and not human nature itself. And I think that we need to take that approach in everything that we do. The best when politics actually was most effective is when people respected people as human beings, and when they disagreed on policy, they would try to find ways to come together to help the most vulnerable. That's what we need to get back
yeah.
to.
Marcus and Amber, I'd love to know from your perspective, Marcus, I suppose first, when you came home and when you were deployed, how did you feel about the purpose of your deployment, the awareness of the American public of what you and your Navy SEAL teammates were going through? And as you came back, what was your surprise or your reaction to the treatment or lack of services to reintegrate?
So let's look at the personal level, like down to the individual level before we look at the system. I think down at an individual level, like you were talking about with the VA, for instance, it's a very fragmented system. It's not a single system. There's 100 and I'm going to make this number up, Ryan, which you'll be upset about. Let's say 145 or more VA systems across the US. So that's 145 different businesses and they operate differently. So it's extremely difficult for an individual to go through that system. But on the individual level, everybody cares and everyone's trying to help. And that is a big problem because when an individual wants to help, but the system won't allow them to, that's an issue. So, for instance, when I attended the NICO Brain Clinic, which is a special operations brain center, world renowned at Walter Reed. At an individual level, it was an incredible program, but the main psychiatrist that was running everything just said, Marcus, I wish I could do some of the things that I know works, but we're not allowed to. And that's a bit frustrating. And I think that's where you hear the poor, Marine grunt or Army grunt that's sitting in a parking lot and takes his own life because he just went into the VA and they told him to wait for 2.5 hours before he was able to see the doctor for 15 minutes. And so, I don't have the answer to the system. It's like an aircraft carrier. Um, you can't get that aircraft carrier to do a 180 very quickly. It has to slow down, and by the time it turns around, there's a lot of people that have to be involved, and there's a lot of red tape to make that happen. And so, on an individual level, I do believe everyone cares. It's when we get caught up in these systems and these clicks and groupthink that it's very difficult to navigate sometimes. And that's where we need our friend networks and our communities. So coming home, there is not a great transition plan in place. And there are checks in the box. And they'll say, we have the TAP program and we have this program and that program. And I'll give an example here. Again, I personally don't want to get political, but I did a bunch of work with the Israeli SEALs. When I went over there, they said, Marcus, you guys have the best training in the world. You have the best gear in the world. We love working with you. We're all inspired by your warfighting abilities. They go, but Marcus, however, you guys are terrible at taking care of your soldiers when they come home. Where we in Israel, it's built into our system. They said we have all the because as a country, they don't have to serve in the military. They can serve in a hospital. They can do peace work. They
Mm,
can do a lot of different work, but they have to serve their sovereign nation. So they have this connectedness to everybody there, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a Israeli version of a SEAL or a Delta Force operator. They just have this shared sovereign community that's saying, okay, when this individual serves on the front lines or serves in the hospital, when they're done with that and they want to get into private business or they want to be a therapist, they have that plan and they have that system set up in place to allow them. And that's what we really don't have here in the
mm,
US. And many of us, like myself and many others I served with, we try to figure it out on our own because that system is set up for, it's set up for the bell curve. It's set up for the 80%. And many of us in special operations, we're kind of at the 20% or really even more than that. And for us, we have to do this, unfortunately, on our own with our wives, with our friend
mm,
groups. And that's why we have all these charities set up, because when the system can't take care of us, we reach out to our community and say, hey, can you help me here?
mm.
And so that's something that we all know we struggle with. And going back to the question of like, how did I feel? That's how we all feel, is how do we make that transition? And if we want to get into,
Sure.
I don't like the term PTSD, but coin it post-transition stress disorder for many of us, where you have all these things that have happened to you before, and now you're supposed to be in a shirt and tie working in Beverly Hills as a banker, and that it's very difficult to make that transition because many of the individuals you work with just don't understand potentially where you came from.
Sure. I want to hear Amber's perspective on the reintegration and how the individual experience translated into this field that you've really built. And please, if you'd be so kind, help us at the individual level, which other than the video, the incredible movie in Waves and War, I've not heard from you your experience. So this will be new to all of us. But then the very broadening scope to the 1% of veterans in the United States and expanding outward into terror minds now and how we can focus on a bigger proportion of the community. And I have a question for Ian just on the backs of that.
All right, I'll try to keep it as concise as I can for the sake of time. I would say that our community is rooted in a couple of things: unconventional thinking and taking care of one another. And so that really is just a replication of what Bets is creating, thinking outside of the box and taking care of one another. I wish we could take care of as many veterans as truly need us. We have to say no to over 9 out of 10 applications that we receive. The need is so great. And I think that the biggest realization for me was that Marcus was a really good soldier in terms of doing what he was instructed to do, which parlayed into his healthcare. Take this bag of pills and see me in 30 days. And those bag of pills came with a myriad of side effects that prompted more and more prescriptions to be written. And so it came to a point where he was either a complete zombie or a raging monster, and there was nothing in between. He had the inability to feel, and the disconnectedness that had already occurred from his 300 days a year away from the family was exacerbated because now we were stuck together and found ourselves on this new battlefield that we were not prepared for. Unfortunately for us and so many in our program, it's a perfect storm of childhood trauma, war trauma,
Mm,
head trauma, transition trauma,
mm,
lack of purpose, lack of paycheck, lack of community. When everything culminates together and these men and women are trained to identify and eliminate the threat. They see themselves as the problem, the threat to their family, whatever. That's when suicide becomes when it comes to the table. And I will never for the life of me be able to understand why we're fighting the veteran suicide epidemic with pharmaceuticals that have a clear warning of increased suicidality on every single bottle. So to me, it just fundamentally did not make sense that we were just band-aiding symptoms, which was prompting more and more prescriptions. And I thought, I've got to think unconventionally, and I've got to get my family off of this battlefield. And in doing so, realize there's something very powerful that is not available to us here in the United States. We have to serve as a triage unit for other veterans who
That's
are
right.
experiencing these struggles, while also simultaneously advocating for policy change at the state and federal levels.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. For everyone's edification, I'll share a slide on this. I want to keep it to us instead of sharing slides, but I'll share a slide when I share the video with everyone. The way I think about this and used to advise family offices around philanthropic allocation is in these three levels of triage, prevention, and systems change. And in both cases, interestingly, actually all three cases here, running for government, sex trafficking, and I began in Mexico. Running for government, our max is 7 grand. Freeing a slave is between 5 and 10,000, and returning somebody home in the way that we describe it within vets is between $5,000 and $12,000. And so there's this same pricing almost for the triage level, but when you go down into systems change prevention, in slavery, for example, we can prevent someone from going into slavery by writing off a $150 loan to a loan shark. This is how a lot of it starts in Southeast Asia. And at the systems change level, the unit of impact is much, much, much less. So Ian, please come back in, and I'd love for you to help us understand the juxtaposition of people's lack of awareness, society's lack of awareness of the scale of this acute challenge that you're able to identify and infiltrate and stop, with the leverage that you're able to accomplish with governors and attorneys general.
Yeah, it was surprising to me. Like I didn't know much about sex trafficking when I left the agency, but had a lot of curiosity and maybe some like latent skills in spying and like learning, and so we spent a lot of years just kind of getting inside of a trafficking organization to understand how it worked. And the lack of awareness is certainly like a enabler of trafficking. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, I don't know. But the fact that sex trafficking happens in strip malls in our towns is shocking usually when people hear that. What's also kind of has been surprising to us is the ease with which we've been able to counter it, and that's after lots and lots of failure.
Share
So,
high level the mechanism because it's very elegant.
so if you want to make money as a trafficker in the illicit massage industry, you need to do three things well to make a profit. One of those three things is you need to lease a commercial storefront. And that sounds really obvious, but it's actually really profound because the storefront takes all the risk out of the transaction. Demand doesn't create sex trafficking any more than like alcohols who want to, teenagers who want to drink alcohol doesn't create a demand for Jack Daniels. But um, everybody in the equation is like really sensitive to risk. Sex buyers are making risk decisions when they choose to buy sex in various venues. And the massage storefront gives you total plausible deniability. You can claim that you were going in for a back massage. And so anybody can watch you walk in and you don't have to worry about being discovered for what you're doing. When things are low risk, obviously people do them a lot. So we really zeroed in on the existence of the storefront as one way of reducing the prevalence of this problem. and discovered that one easy way to do that is to share our data. We scrape all the adult pornography websites where these locations are advertised and where they're reviewed. So we've got a huge body of information on the fact that these are commercial sex brothels. And we provide that information to district attorneys or attorneys general. And we just ask them to do one simple thing: mail a letter to the landlord informing them that they have a tenant that's committing a crime inside of their space. I mean, that's, criminal activity is a violation of every commercial lease in America. And that letter has resulted in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of evictions over these past few years. And what's more interesting is that because we were doing it for a few years, as we can measure the recidivism rate, we're seeing that they don't reopen. And we probably don't have enough time to get into that on this call, but like we have an understanding of why we're actually able to take a really big complex system and make it a lot smaller over a short amount of time.
And as you hear these two leverage points, the network communicating with attorneys general and governors, and vets leveraging the data that comes out of Mexico, in this case using ibogaine, and they didn't announce this or celebrate it, but in a relatively short period of time, Amber can share with us exactly how long, but they've been able to help leverage, is another word, but make use of over $124 million from state coffers to advance psychedelic research. So now not just veterans can access this. Yes, that's step one, but a broader population. As you hear these two vectors, these two changes, how can a congressperson, a senator, or a well-positioned individual in the White House work to, one, find more of these opportunities, and two, explain them to the public and celebrate them so that we can get
Yep.
excited about the inner workings of what you do?
I'm a baseball fan, so I'm going to use a very poor analogy, but my time in DC made me realize the value of a member of Congress who wants solutions and who wants to proactively find ways to scale what's working than a replacement player in that position. There are so many people in DC on both sides of the aisle, candidly, who are all about the glitz and glamour and the fancy DC stuff and not about delivering for their district or trying to make things better in the country. And so there are so many programs, and I was the deputy cabinet secretary in the White House in different agencies to help nonprofits scale. And so I think the strategy is twofold. One is to make sure that we are communicating outwardly what what opportunities there are. For example, at the Small Business Administration, you think about the founder of Chobani. He founded Chobani because he found a flyer in a coffee shop or something like that that gave him hope that he could get an interest-free loan to buy his first yogurt processor. That's why he found it. That's how he was able to create Chobani with a government program, right? So making sure that people understand, and it's not a happenstance thing, but everyone understands, while also having proactive outreach and research proactively to say, hey, family organization, you may have not even realized that this is an opportunity for you. Here's a very nowhere near the scale of what some of these amazing people on this call are doing, but a small thing that made a big difference in Boston. Early in Waze's time, they were looking for federal city partners to help scale its work. We reached out to them. We partnered with them. The most exciting and interesting and dorky thing in City Hall is the traffic management center. You have 5 or 6 people in a room, literally switching the lights all day long to try to optimize it based on traffic. We partnered with Waze to better and more efficiently time the lights in the city of Boston. I know many people may not believe
Nice.
this, but the data that we saw was we were able to reduce traffic in some of these key intersections by 10 to 15% just by having better data with Waze. That was because we reached out to them, we negotiated the data sharing agreement, and it was a win-win for everyone. It wasn't a dollar of any more infrastructure. It didn't take bureaucracy and time. It just took will. And we need to have more people willing to do that at different levels of government.
Nice. I don't remember the data on this, but there's something like if if you stand in front of the open door at a on coming off of a train in Manhattan at Grand Central Station, if you stand in front of that door for 1 minute at 9 a.m., the number of hours of inefficiency that you create is unbelievable. Similarly, something like 80% um, of all air traffic delays come from New York or London because of the number of connections that are made there. And so, again, this all goes back to awareness that if people know that in local government or mid-sized government, that their days are being prioritized, their human days, their human minutes, their human hours are being prioritized, I think that we would interact with city officials, government officials in a different way. I think we would have a different level of appreciation and awareness of how this whole system works. Um, Amber, um, can you help us, because we're coming to time here, can you help us understand the success of Texas and California, how that's being parlayed, and how the 100 well-positioned folks, or maybe 150 well-positioned listeners thereafter, listening to the recording, can be helpful at the state level to get more than $124 million to hasten this pace because we need our minds back?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to highlight that you said Texas and California, two states that are very politically um, different, and yet we're working on similar bills last legislative session. They're different, each state has a different appetite for different measures, but it actually started in Texas in 2021 when Marcus and I were asked to support a bill that would provide $2 million in state funding for a psilocybin study in partnership with Baylor College of Medicine and the Houston VA. This was the first of its kind sort of legislation at the state level, and a number of other states have replicated that. Several actually this year are following Texas's lead, but Texas came back last session in 2025 and passed a historic piece of legislation which appropriated $50 million from the state budget surplus to start ibogaine clinical trials in the state. There are some challenges with FDA, of course, because of the oversight necessary for drug development trials, but it really sort of put a stake in the ground for other states to get excited about this sort of legislation, and that is not specific to veterans, nor is the bill that we work to pass in California. But it is to say that a number of states, and Betson's in over 20 this legislative session in some capacity, are very interested in this topic, whether it be for opioid use disorder or veterans or just the general public. But yeah, we've worked collectively to unlock $124 million of funding. Now, what many don't understand is that the psychedelic research that has emerged since the early 2000s has been largely supported by philanthropy. There's been very little state or federal funding. So I guess is your question, what can other states do?
My question is, what can we do to unlock it? I know, and I'll announce it, I know for Ian and for the network, it's connections into attorneys general and governors, and both of those are changing across all of our states. It's, we're always in a process of finding those right people and drawing folks' attention when they're very busy. Our Attorney General here in Massachusetts was doing a lot in the federal government, and so for a year this hasn't been prioritized, and I'm working on figuring out another way. And so similarly, what's the tip of the spear for you?
Sure. Well, connections to state legislators who are willing to tackle this issue. It's been beautifully bipartisan. The team at Vets is beautifully bipartisan, and we firmly believe that whenever you come together, that's when real progress is made, because we're far more alike than we are different. And so we've worked with legislators on both sides of the aisle who've worked with their colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
What Vets has done is put together a system to be able to get behind those champions to get this done. So we have grant recipients in 49 states who are trained ambassadors ready to partner with these lawmakers to support their bills, which is why we've had such a high degree of success. So yes, any connections into elected officials who might be willing to look at this would be
Yeah.
welcomed.
I understand from Marcus, from our call the other day, that there are 21 states that are particularly in focus for you. And so I'll get that from your team and circulate it with our community.
Perfect.
Ian,
Thank you.
it's present for me that two of the most inspirational humans on earth to me to do work for the last 20 years in these fields were both slaves. Um, can you share the recent data that the network has been able to accumulate on where the women are going afterwards? I know you said it was too long for this call, but I think most people out of 100 would like to know that. And and to the degree that you know it or feel it, um, what you perceive to be the new beginning, right? Luong and Emmanuel Jal both had their own new beginnings, and 30 years later, they're inspiring millions of people around the world. What are the new beginnings that you're watching after
Mm,
a closure?
there's a there's a woman named Jing Jing who was exploited in Los Angeles and then Las Vegas and then Birmingham, Alabama, and was released from trafficking through a arrest and was referred to an aftercare provider we partner with in Birmingham. And she didn't speak English when she went there, and they just figured it out. These are a bunch of sweet Alabama women who figured out how to communicate with her. She learned English. She exited the program. She got a job at Walmart. She got promoted to her department manager as a department manager at Walmart. She met a man, got married, and this past summer I got to meet her baby. And she's one of the most joyful people you'll interact with, and I totally understand why you take inspiration from those friends, Ryan. Um, and she and a couple other women worked with us this past year to design content like short videos in Mandarin that we can send into illicit massage storefronts. So we train aftercare providers in lots of states to do outreach to these storefronts, to talk to the women, to give them information about um, how they can get legal services to become documented residents of the United States. One of their biggest felt needs. Second biggest felt need is like they want to learn English. And so we just partner with community organizations that teach people English. And then third is connections to employment. Those are kind of the big three things that we learned. I actually posted the link to the study in the chat here. So if you guys want to dig into that, you can download it there.
Thank you. Last question, and then we'll formulate a closure here. Dan, you're two generations away from somebody who had to leave their country because of the dissolution of freedom and systems around them. That's a blink of an eye in history. You have done a lot in government. Now you have a new chance to do. How do we best uphold the rule of law in this accelerated pace of life? And what do you look forward to hearing these stories to unlock that power for more individuals?
What gives me hope is that when you have a conversation that is based on positive and thoughtful intent more than anything else. And I think one of the things that politics has lost the most right now is the lack of respect on intention. Of course, if someone wants to talk to you about a political issue and they are hell bent on making you feel small or disagreeing or yelling, it's not going to be productive. But I think that there are enough people on either side of the aisle, especially non-electeds, candidly, whose intentions are good and want to see this country continue to make progress and be the global leader that we pride ourselves in. And so I certainly believe that was a reason why my grandfather chose this country over a dictatorship. I think it's why so many people are on this call, is because they're looking for something to give them hope. They want to continue to advance society in a positive way.
Hmm.
And there's too much momentum around that right now for me to accept the kind of resolution that I think many people on both sides of the aisle would like us to accept, which is politics will always be the way that we see it right now.
Hmm. I have so much to say. I hope that this develops into individual phone calls where folks can watch recorded or live, and we can dive deep into all of these things. I think we've experienced on this call that this is just barely scratching the surface. Thank you all for being here and for sharing your insights. I want to close with two things. Um, I'm going to close with a quote from a mathematics professor in Carnegie Mellon. Thank you, Paul, for asking what is the best way to communicate with the speakers. I will absolutely, while holding everybody's emails in confidence that don't want to interact at this time, I'll absolutely share the capabilities of doing so with follow-up materials. So I want to do two things. I want to share this quote. I welcome you all to revisit the little note that you took of "I'm free too," and then we're going to see where this goes. And I just love you all for being here, and I'm so grateful. So the quote that I wanted to share from this guy named Po Shen Lo. He's a professor of advanced mathematics at Carnegie Mellon. He's asked all the time now, what should kids learn in order to be employable in the future? And I've asked a lot of fathers that too. And my determination is that, yes, there are 60 years of challenges to solve. Therefore, there are very healthy careers for all of our children. And as long as we work on solving problems together, they're going to be fine. But what I really loved was what he said. He said, the philosophy in life should not be how do I outdo anybody or everyone else. If you do that, you'll probably never be satisfied, even if you win. But if your philosophy in life is, oh, it's actually addictive to make a bunch of other people happy. Oh, now I can do it for 5 people. Now I can do it for 50. Now 500. How do I get 10,000 people to be joyful? The more you do, the more you want to do. You all, Dan, Ian, Amber, and Marcus, do not see the glorious smiling faces that wake up in the mornings thanks to your work. I hope that you can. I hope that you can feel those smiling faces because we all need you to be hypercharged and powered to keep going. And I hope that everyone else on this call drinks a glass of water straight from the sink or from the shower and realizes the systems that are in place that get to power our day. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks,
Ryan,
man.
thank you so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a joy.
Mhm.
Cheers, my friend. Appreciate you.